Western Australia has more than 30,000 active cases of COVID-19 for the first time after setting a new record for daily infections, with the Premier predicting numbers will peak in a few days. Key points. A woman in her 80s has from COVID, with 140 people in hospital. A woman in her 80s has from COVID, with 140 people in hospital. Hospital cases will peak after daily cases do, the Premier says. Hospital cases will peak after daily cases do, the Premier says. He has faced the media in Perth alongside the Prime Minister. In the 24 hours to 8 p.m. last night, 7,151 new cases were reported, bringing the active infection count to 31,211. Another person, a woman in her 80s, has also from the virus. 4 people are in intensive care, among a total of 140 patients in hospital with COVID-19. Premier Mark McGowan said the hospitalisation rate was very stable, and by national and international standards a very low number. More than 71% of West Australians over the age of 16 have received a booster dose, something Mr McGowan said factored into the hospitalisation rate. "We expect that we're a few days away from our caseload peak," he said. "Our hospitalisation peak will come after that." A total of 3,797 of today's cases came from self-reported rapid antigen tests. Of the 15,603 PCR swabs taken, 3,354 came back positive. McGowan fronts media with Scott Morrison. Mr McGowan appeared alongside Prime Minister Scott Morrison this morning, where they announced extra funding for 2 projects, a new campus for Edith Cowan University in the CBD, and a pedestrian and cycle bridge across the Swan River. Mark McGowan and Scott Morrison appeared together for a media conference in Perth. The money was to account for rising labour and material costs. When opposition leader Anthony Albanese visited Perth earlier this month, immediately after the state's borders reopened, Mr McGowan notably did not make a public appearance with him. The Premier said today's press conference was not about campaigning, but about securing WA money in the upcoming federal budget. Mr McGowan says the announcements are real money in the bank for WA. The election has not been called. When the election is called, of course, I will be campaigning with Anthony Albanese, he said. But today I'm doing an important budget announcement, which is real money in the bank for Western Australia. The Premier said he did not have enough time to meet with Mr Albanese, in part because he flew out of the state to see his elderly parents in New South Wales before giving evidence in a defamation case brought by businessman Clive Palmer. In the case, details of Mr McGowan's close relationship with media magnate Kerry Stokes, who owns the West Australian newspaper and Channel 7, were revealed. The Premier declined to answer questions about that relationship, saying he would not comment on matters before the courts. Loading.